Hello everyone. This video is for Chapter 13 on gifted and talented. This week we have Chapter 13. You'll have a quiz and discussion board on this chapter. We'll go over each one here. You'll also want to make sure that you're keeping up with your DI collection. Should be 20 to 25 items at this point. Make sure you've got them in different categories, and also make sure you've shared your board with me. You don't have to share your whole Pinterest. You can just share the board with me, and I'll make sure and do that. Look at the assignment page for my information. Let's see here. Went through that. And make sure I've gone through this. Doing a great job so far, by the way. I've only got this week, and then you've got next week, which only has one chapter and an evaluation. Make sure if you get the email, you should get an email about an evaluation on the class. Make sure and do that. I don't get to see it until after grades are submitted. I don't get to see who did it as far as, your information. It sends it out anonymously, and then I get it anonymously too. So try to make sure and do that. I've done a few changes this summer, and I'd like to see what your comments are about the class, see if there's anything I could tweak. So anyway, let's go ahead and get going. By now, hopefully you pulled up the PowerPoint, my notes, chapter 13. And we'll go ahead and get into it. I've left it pretty short and sweet this week. The objectives, you'll be able to explain how the dynamic and evolving definition of giftedness has changed and how students are being identified and served. Describe the characteristic of gifted students and explain why they need special education. And identify the estimated prevalence of gifted students. You'll also be able to state guidelines for effectively and fairly identifying gifted students from racially, cultural, and economic different groups. You'll be able to compare and contrast project-based learning, problem-based learning, and inquiry-based learning on that one. You'll also be able to describe the relative benefits of various placement options for gifted students. Next, I have a slide. I want you to give what your thoughts are. So go ahead and read that. Why do students who are very bright need special education? Pause this video and give your ideas. And then when you come back, we will go through that. Okay. Well, why do they? Well, special education is necessary for children when their physical attributes and or learning abilities differ from the norm to such an extent that an individualized program of special education is required to meet their needs. Just as traditional curriculum is often inappropriate for the child with a disability, it can also be inappropriate for the child who is gifted and talented. The traditional curriculum may not provide the kinds of challenges the gifted student requires to learn most effectively. When a traditional classroom curriculum is not allowing children who are gifted and talented to fulfill their potential and succeed fully, then special education is needed. So just like the students that we've talked about in the past few chapters that have a disability, students that are gifted and talented need extra rigor, need more information, and can get bored and can cause problems in the classroom if you don't keep them on topic. And by the time you get done, you'll know how to work with those students. Compared to children of their own age, they exhibit high achievement capability in areas of intellectual, creative, leadership, or artistic capacity. They excel in a specific academic field, or they need services and activities not ordinarily provided by the school to fully develop those capabilities. National Association for Gifted Children says individuals who demonstrate outstanding levels of aptitude or competence in one or more domains. And here's a few other contemporary definition. You've got Renzulli's three-trait definition, where they're above average general IQ or abilities, high level of task commitment, and creativity. Pirto's concept of talent development. You've got Maker's problem-solving perspective, which includes high intelligence, advanced creativity, and excellent problem-solving skills. You've got state-by-state definitions, and general intelligence prevails across the state, and other aspects of special abilities. Let's talk about the characteristics. Rapidly acquire, retain, and use large amounts of information. Relate to one another, one idea to another. Make sound judgments, and appreciate multiple and opposing viewpoints. The next one, I have two videos. Now, you may have seen one of them. I did go ahead and add one to the autism. We were talking about Savant. But here are two right here I'd like for you to watch. I know Rain Man's is pretty extensive, but it does give you a great idea. So at least, if you don't have time right now today, go ahead and at least go through it and catch that. Definitely look at the Daniel Tammet one there. So I'll go ahead and go on in the video, but you can go ahead and look at that either now or later. More characteristics. They perceive the operation of larger systems of knowledge not often recognized by the typical person. They acquire and manipulate abstract symbol systems. They solve problems by reframing the question and creating novel solutions. Their precociousness, showing highly advanced abilities and skills at a young age, highly developed sense of moral judgment, fair play, compassion, and empathy. Their parts of creativity. Dimensions of creativity include all of these areas. They go more in the book, but you can talk about fluency, flexibility, novelty and originality, elaboration, synthesizing ability, analyzing ability, and the ability to reorganize or redefine existing ideas and complexity. The precocity and individual differences. They display creativeness, talents, or intellectual abilities that are highly advanced for their age. And dimensions of individual differences. There can be inter-individual differences, intra-individual differences, and asynchrony. You'll want to look in the book to get a little better idea of which is which. Here we're talking about the prevalence. Gifted and talented children comprise about 3 to 5% of the student population according to federal reports. Percent varies widely from state to state. Identification and assessment. Comprehensive and equitable assessments include group and individual IQ tests, achievement, proficiency, and state tests, portfolios of student work, teacher, parent, family, caregiver, self, and peer nominations, and extracurricular or leisure activities are all part of that assessment. The multicultural assessment identification. In the book, it talks about the fact that it's underrepresentation of African American, Hispanic, and Native American students in these gifted education programs is a persistent and pervasive problem. There are low rates of referrals because educators' low expectations and the use of culturally biased tests and instruments primarily to blame. So make sure you're watching your students as they go through, and make sure you're keeping an eye and not being a little biased on that. 10 core attributes of giftedness across socioeconomic and ethnic and racial groups. And it talks about all these different areas that you want to look at, the 10 attributes. Let's look at the criteria. Identify with a goal of inclusion rather of exclusion. Gather data from multiple sources. Use a combination of formal and informal testing techniques, and begin identification procedures as early as possible. Multicultural assessment criteria there. The use of unconventional or non-traditional measures involves arts and aesthetic expression. Use of information gathered during the identification process to help determine the curriculum, programs, and services. In the absence of high-quality, culturally responsive instruction, culturally and racially diverse gifted and talented students may distance themselves from the gifted label and be hesitant to enter and unwilling to stay in a gifted program. Gifted and talented girls. There are conflicts concerning role definition, poor self-concept, poor academic choices, and lack of support. In the boys, there's negative stereotyping for boys with talented in the arts. and gifted and talented student with disabilities. The gifts and talents can be masked by their disability. They can be twice exceptional and need a dually differentiated curriculum. And we talked about this a little bit early on, that especially in the learning disabled area, but it can occur in others, that they might be learning disabled in one area like writing, but they could be gifted and talented in math. So just because they are on an IEP for a learning disability or another area, they might be in a gifted and talented also. Here's another question, so I want to read this and then I'll let you pause the video, put down an answer, and then we'll go to the next slide. How can the general education classroom teacher provide instruction at the pace and depth needed by gifted and talented students while meeting the needs of other students in the classroom? Great question. So pause the video and write down your answer. We'll be right back. All right. Well, there's three common approaches for gifted and talented students. They're enrichment, curriculum compacting, and acceleration. Enrichment experiences allow the students to investigate topics of interest. Curriculum compacting is compressing instructional content so students have more time to work on more challenging materials, whereas acceleration allows the student to move through the curriculum faster. Each of these approaches can be used by the regular education classroom teacher. Although ability grouping has been an issue of considerable debate, it is one strategy that might enable regular classroom teachers to appropriately differentiate instruction. Grouping enables gifted students to be appropriately challenged through more rapid and advanced instruction, and allowing gifted students to be grouped so that they can progress at their own pace may preserve the student's motivation to learn and help prevent problems such as boredom and aversion towards school. I know in the schools that I've been associated with, many times they had a pull-out or after-school type situation where they would go to a separate classroom during the day and receive some enrichment or some advancement in an area to help them be less bored in class and help them do this. So that's one way. But those are the three different ways that you might do that. The overall educational goal for gifted and talented is the fullest possible development of every child's demonstrated and potential ability. Academically rigorous, increased relevance and depth of curriculum, thematic and interdisciplinary include the structures, terminologies, and methodologies of various disciplines, whereas response to and respectful of gifted students' learning characteristics, matching students' unique needs. So you're going to be looking at those. Similar to what you did with what we talked about with our students in special education with different disabilities. There's curriculum differentiation. There's tailoring teaching environments, curricula, and instructional practices to create appropriately different learning experiences for students with different needs, interest, readiness, and learning profiles. Educational approaches, there again we'll go into depth a little bit more. Acceleration, methods for increasing the speed through which a student progresses through school. Curriculum compacting assesses students' knowledge and skills in the target areas, determine the content to be eliminated, and substitute more appropriate content. There's enrichment. Enables students to probe or study specific subject matter, a topic of interest, or a discipline in a greater detail and depth, accomplish process and content-related goals. School-wide enrichment model is also talked about in there. And then the question, accelerate or enrich, depending on the subject matter and the student, which one are you going to want to do? Differentiated instruction in classroom. There's those different approaches. You need to look at those in the book as you're reading. There's Bloom's taxonomy, tiered lessons, inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, and project-based learning. Definitely look at those three to get an idea of what they are like. Get that changed here real quick. There we go. And I want that. Do a little updating here. Okay. There's differentiating outside the classroom. There's internship and mentor programs, specialized courses, junior grade books, summer programs, and international experiences that can be done. There's also different placement options the book talks about. There's ability grouping, which we kind of discussed a little bit earlier. There's special schools and special classrooms. Special charter schools for gifted and talented students have been established in some states. Cluster ability grouping, the top 5 to 8 highest performing students at a given grade level learn together in a general education classroom, but mixed ability students. There's resource room or pull-out, cluster performance, like ability, cooperative learning group, and consultative teacher model. You'll want to look at those and get an idea of the differences so that you can understand those a little bit. And the last question that you'll be asked on this one: should gifted students be educated with their same age peers or with older students who share the same intellectual and academic talents or interests? Go ahead and pause this, and then we'll discuss that and the different thoughts. Okay, here is the answer that I've come up with, or whatever, through the book. And I'll talk about some experiences too. Because gifted students learn at a faster rate than most students, they benefit from a differentiated curriculum that can include enrichment and acceleration. With enrichment, a gifted child can stay in a class with same-age peers but study a topic at greater depth. With with acceleration, students move more quickly through the curriculum. Grade skipping is one of these forms of acceleration. One commonly heard concern is that grade skipping will lead to social and emotional problems because a child will be in a classroom with students who are more advanced physically and emotionally. School personnel and parents are usually concerned that talented students will suffer from the pressure to achieve or will become emotional misfits. However, longitudinal research found no evidence that acceleration harms willing students academically or socially. I think the key here is, number one, willing students. This needs to be taking the students' ideas and thoughts into this too. Because yes, we have had that, especially when they get to, it may not be as prevalent in the early elementary grades, but when they do get to middle school and high school, as students go through natural changes in their bodies, in their emotions, it can cause some emotional problems between those students and their peers. Just think about those middle school years that you went through, and think about going through that with more older children, young adults. So it can become a little bit of a concern when they do come middle school and high school. But I think as long as the team makes sure that the family and the student is involved in this, I think it can be an option that they can utilize. So anyway, that is the end of Chapter 13. Again, go ahead. You have the items for Chapter 13, the quiz and discussion board. By now, you should have turned in your observation. If not, you probably have gotten an email from me. I'm right now probably in the process of going through those. It will be more days than normal to get these done. I normally go through them twice. So depending on the amount of students in this particular class, it can take up to 2 weeks for me to get those done. But I will get them done quickly, as quickly as I can. I'd also make sure and suggest that you check your emails. If there is a whole section missing, I will give that student the opportunity of redoing that section. You will receive an email from me with specific instructions. Make sure and read those instructions and do add items as I've instructed you, and then return that in the way I have instructed. So anyway, have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.